Hey, Mattie, what are we talking about today?
Well, Michelle, we're running it back today. Early in our podcast career, we went over my main methodology for college admission advice, referred to as FLL. And it was a good episode, but I think we're going to try it again for a new audience, basically breaking down the core of how you actually get into college, what I actually do with students, and what my overall philosophy is to doing so. I think people will want to hear it.
Ooh, awesome. Can't wait.
Okay, Michelle, I did last time. FLL is my overall strategy for college admissions. It stands for fucking loves learning. Yes, I'm pretty sure I haven't dropped an F-bomb in this podcast in like at least 10 or 20 episodes. So like the idea of I think I could get away with it here. Basically, yeah, it's meant to be a bit of a joke, the term, and a lot of usually it's very helpful when I explain it to like really often conservative, very nervous parents and they laugh. Like it's the idea is there is some irony behind the titling, but the concept is truly integral to how I feel is the best way to get into college and how I actually operate with students. And it is basically, well, as here is Michelle is, I'll get to how I kind of figured this all out. But when a student applies to college, what are they applying for? Is a question that another consultant who I bought his video series and then stole his information from, he once posed that was really inspiring to me. And well, Michelle, I think I asked you this rhetorical once before. Do you remember the answer?
Probably not, but I mean, I guess they're applying to be a student at the college.
There you go. Yes, you do remember. That
Okay,
was the
good.
exact answer. And that's important. And I think it sounds almost like a tautology or just like so obvious but when you are applying to college, you are applying to be a student. And that is really important to understand. You are not applying to be where unless you're like going to be a recruited athlete. You're not applying to be an athlete. You're not applying to be like the best person on campus. You're not applying to have any sort of real leadership position necessarily inherently. You're applying to be a student there. Like that is what they're accepting you for, and that is what you're paying for. That idea then naturally leads to like, well, what makes a good student?
hmm
And this one, I don't think I asked last. Like, what do you think? Well, ignoring like college admissions craziness, like what do you think makes a good student? You know, like if you were a teacher or a professor or like you were in a school, what would you want in a student?
I mean, if I were a teacher or professor, I'd want somebody who's like into learning from me.
Yeah, like it's again, it all sounds like too simple to be
True.
true, but that's why it's so effective because that is the truth. You want and more specifically, yeah, there's a couple other aspects. You'd want someone who you don't want like a crappy kid. You don't want a jerk, right? But it's more.
That's true.
So I guess we ask again, what wouldn't you want in your student? Like what kind of traits or personality or things we think would be detrimental to you being able to teach them?
Yeah, like a creepy serial killer type or somebody who's just not into it either.
Yeah, someone who's not into it, someone who's just like a jerk, or someone
Yeah.
who I guess doesn't get it, that doesn't see academics as their priority. You know, someone that might be more interested in just the job they're going to have afterwards or what they can get out of this. That like in a vacuum as a teacher, like that would be annoying. You wouldn't want that. You like what the opposite is. You want perky, like well-meaning students, like their actual personality, I guess the key is somewhat like up to them. You know, it's not like I don't think teachers necessarily want like extrovert or introverted students. I don't think they want hard workers, but they don't want like insane robot hard work. You know, the thing is FLL is key because it helps break down like what you actually should be focusing upon, what actually matters in this process, and similarly cuts out a lot of stuff that really doesn't matter as much, and that's why I'm such a fan of it. So I in the original version of this podcast when I was like 50 pounds heavier and had a beard. That's also why we're refilming these. Is that like I cannot in good faith have like one of my favorite episodes, most important thing be me with like a big fat guy beard. So here I am now, like clean shaven, ready to go. But I drafted out. I actually defined what FLL is, and I stand by it. I just changed it a little bit like grammatically. So it's FLL is a college application strategy that emphasizes intellectual vitality as well as academic enthusiasm. Specifically, it is an application with a primary goal of imparting a genuine love of learning, as well as creative and productive applications of what students learn in ways that matter to them. That love of learning then can and should naturally translate to the opportunities they wish to partake in at their future school. And that's a mouthful, but the title is effective. You want to showcase that you effing love learning. Like
hmm
it is not that you it's not that you love school necessarily, and it's not that you love any particular aspect of learning. Well, I guess like it's about what you learn. It's like, but the process of learning itself is key, as well as you simply like learning for the sake of learning and getting to, and just as important, getting to use what you've learned to create new things and to better your own well-being. That's just as important. Like those are the two halves of the puzzle. Well, how I came to the system, and I put one on the line, it's like I stole it from other people. But like the shorter version is that I entered this industry in 2019. I worked the first year and a half at a tutoring center in the Bay Area, and then I bounced and started my own company. And this is now my 7th year that we're entering. I didn't know you then, but for the first 2.5 years, I didn't really know what I was doing. It's kind of a joke, but not really. And the further I get in my career, the more confident I feel about the work I'm doing, the more I just understand how different it was those first couple years and how I would not have wanted like my own assistance those first couple years. That's a difference, I guess. And maybe
Mm.
even more importantly is after that 2.5 year period, the system has stayed the same. Like that, like spoiler, 2.5 years in is when I figure out I figure out FLL.
Okay.
Over the 2.5 years, what I also remember is how unbelievably miserable I was doing it. Like I didn't like. It turns out I didn't like being a fraud in my own in the company I was trying to storm, and then being a fraud trying to get kids in Harvard and Stanford and Yale and Princeton. Like but what I do because I entered this world as a writer, and the hardest part was I knew that I could get if like, I guess when or if I could figure out what these schools wanted, like, what do these schools want? That was the question I was
Mhm.
asking myself over and over and over and over again. And I was so adamant that must exist because if it did, then I could figure it out. Like then, like once I figured it out, and I was confident about if that's why it was so hard. It's like maybe it's just not going to work, you know. But like if I could figure it out, then I could completely steer students in that direction in a way I knew would be effective because I knew the writing and I knew the strategy stuff. I could put it together, but I couldn't. I had no idea what that if was because I had pretty weak leadership when I was starting out. I'm doing my own thing and I'm just reading the internet and like it's a billion different ideas. And so what did I do? Is I basically did like guess and check with real human lives, I guess. And what I had were a number of students that had natural interests and proclivities and personality traits, and I guess I took all of them and tried to essentially present them the best possible version of that, or the one I think would be most interesting to colleges. So I
Okay.
would get if I had a girl student who was like pretty stern, I guess, and kind of like alpha type. I would play into that. I would her application would be kind of aggressive and stern and
Hmm.
like world domination-y, I suppose. Whereas if I had a much more sensitive student, a boy usually, I would make his application kind of like soft. It'd
Mhm.
be about the challenge, the difficulties, and what he feels inside. Or yeah, and if I had someone who was just like a hyper overachiever, for example, I would just play into that. They're I play their extroversion, how they always want more. They're so excited about it. And
Right.
results were mixed, I guess. I learned a lot more from the failures than the successes, I would say, at first. And that I quickly figured out certain stuff doesn't work. That's why anyone who came off as like anxious or arrogant, I quickly figured
Yeah.
out was of no go because those were students that because I'd be tracking results. Like I was diligent about hearing like where they didn't get in. And I kind of understood how strong they were and overall. But the students that underperformed tend to be arrogant or anxious. And those were out. Like I got that very quickly. The arrogant one particularly burned because the line between arrogant and confident I realize is very thin. And
True.
the more I'm figuring out stuff that doesn't work, the more I'm realizing like there must be something that does, and
Yeah.
similarly overcoming challenges like not great, the results are not great in a way. And I'll stand by these results because I know it's a really good version of that application. Like I stand by the work. Like when I look back at all work, I stand by the actual writing. Like it's good, and I get what I was thinking. It is simply like the strategies. Like nah, I know why that
Mm.
doesn't work now. Gee willikers. So that leads me to basically my second year is College with Mattie. My third year. That's when I work with your son, I believe, is that
Mhm.
year. And well, I meet a student actually, and let's say her name is Ashley because I feel like 9 Ashleys. This isn't Ashley, but it's a girl named Ashley. And Ashley is best way to describe it is her disposition, her personality is that Ashley effing loved learning.
Okay.
Independent of pretty much like everything else. That is the best way to describe what she. And she was a perky go getter. She was a highly high achieving, but she was really passionate about what she did in a way
Mhm.
that was kind of inspiring. And while working with her, I believe I mentioned it's like you remind me of the kids that got into Harvard when I was your age. Like that's what you remind me of. She's like, oh, good. I hope I get. And we work super hard, and she's an absolute grinder. Like it's like underneath the facade of. Turns out she's like valedictorian and other things because she's an absolute grinder and wants this badly enough, even under the
Right.
facade of like, oh, gee willikers, I have so much fun.
Yeah.
And then Ashley, I thought she was a strong candidate, but did not blow me away. But like I thought she would do fine. She got into Yale, Harvard, MIT, and Princeton, which is To this day, it's the strongest results of my career. There's been a couple students
Right.
that are close-ish, and I infamously gave her a 2% chance to get into Yale, which she's still mad about, and then she got
Oh
into
my
Yale and froze. Yeah,
god.
and it was somewhere between, like, while working with her and also, I guess, just after the fact, in hindsight, that's also when I watched, like, a bunch of YouTube series and stole the ideas of the good ones, which basically said the same thing, like, but the Ashley story is more fun, right? It's much more literary. That was basically the year after that, I had a concussion, so I was, like, really out of
Right.
sorts, I remember that year after, basically, like, I'm just gonna turn every kid into Ashley, like, whatever. With my
Mhm.
concussion, I kind of lacked an ability to, like, do too much, I suppose. I had to be more of a robot, and I was like, "Okay, if I'm gonna be a robot, I need to pick a casing to put all these kids into. I'm gonna make
Oh,
them so
yeah.
all like Ashley." And that year, the results were phenomenal. My concussion year was the best results I've had in my entire career, and that's when I knew, it's like, and along the way, I had figured out that, like, yeah, I began to understand why such a mindset was
Mhm.
effective. But that is how I got there. Quite honestly, since that day, like FLL, it says, is like intellectual vitality, perky go getter, warm, and effing loves learning. Like that is what Ashley was, and like those are the three core components to FLL. But it all plays into like a love of learning, essentially. So basically, I got four things why it works, why FL is so successful, and why I stand by it. And yeah, the last 3 or 4 years since I've met you and since you've been working, like the strategy has not changed. And
Right.
I think it's the same. The game is the game. As I tell people about college admissions now because that's how I feel. All I've done is refine it. Is all it's been is how can I be more efficient doing this? How that was what bringing you on was about. It's like what aspects of this process, like little pieces in my week at, but the overall philosophy that I basically instructed to you is the same. It's about
Mhm.
playing up. And I guess for you, for like EC list stuff, it's a little bit more about like swagging a little bit, but there's swagging in the essays too. It's like
Right.
why FLL works. One is a skeleton key, and this is going to be a little bit something we get to in the like backing up your major aspect, but like institutional priorities, what different schools want. There are some schools that are more interested in overcoming adversity or leadership or I don't know any other core way you can try to get into college, like strategy you can have. But every single school in America, no matter who they are, what they stand for, they appreciate and are interested in assigning students that love learning more than everybody
Right.
else. That is at the core why it is so effective. I guarantee you that there are students who also would have gotten into great schools had we gone with some other crazy strategy. Just like students still did pretty well in my first year as college with Mattie. However, it's more about like the odds of getting in, trying to play the variances
Right.
and hitting casting a much wider net. FLL is like a real overall strategy in that I most more up pretty much have students sound the same and have very similar essays or strategies for every school they apply to.
Mhm.
Whereas I think there's other consult then yeah, this part as of like the 2.5 years. Like at one point I was like, well, different schools want different things, so we will try that. But like that's too much work. It kind of falls apart. And it's a combination of I guess I don't know what Brown wants versus Stanford. I don't know what MIT
Yeah.
wants versus and every time people claim to know that and they actually post it like, oh, it's somewhere between like that's garbage. Like that means nothing to in actual practicality. Or oh, you so they like kids who learn, huh? Like that's got it. So that is a big part of it. Two, it avoids landmines. So just as important as knowing what to write about in an application is knowing what not to write about. And that is that
Right.
that also from the 2.5 years, there were certain ideas I went with that were in good, they were in good faith. And the writing was sound. I still stand by the actual quality of it. However, they accidentally tripped a landmine. A landmine is anything that basically is a bad idea for college admissions. And that's something I've
Mhm.
talked a lot about in past episodes. And basically, yeah, acting trip to myself and seeing those results, like mental health is a huge one. Like there's not a lot of mental health talk in FLL.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of overcoming adversity talk in FLL because I don't think it's effective. Like the stuff that I
Mhm.
mentioned, FLL is exclusionary just as much as inclusionary. Like anything that is basically not with the goal of imparting intellectual vitality slash using that, like it tends not to come up very much. There are no application essays I students do that's about like a chance encounter with a homeless man or
Yeah.
or bigger thoughts on like a global issue or anything like that simply. And that is and like even saying I'm like good, like that stuff sucks. Like
Right.
it is shockingly small, like the keyhole that it seems like is like a highly effective strategy, but this is what it is. It's easier and more fun to do. Yeah, like this is important. Is like I like this strategy as well because it is a path of least resistance with students. I will
Mhm.
say that the first thing every student does actually meets with you and builds a resume, like a college admissions resume, where they're getting out their ideas of what they've done. Then they meet with you again soon after, and they draft out like a longer written version of that essay where they just like basically explain the path it took to get where they are. And I guess it's getting into back of your major, which is coming next. But I then take that information and I go, okay, cool. Here's what you did. I like this, and this you've done. Why'd you like that? And
Mhm.
what I am guiding them towards is to, yeah, like figure out what about the subject matter that they particularly enjoyed and why that was so important to them and so satisfying, and then what they did with it.
Right.
That's an essay, and then we do another one, and then usually there's one about like, you like cats, huh? Can you talk about cats? And then we write a short answer or one you see about cats. But even in that, they're like, hey, can you get some like, can you like did you learn anything about cats here? Like what would you? And they're like, yeah, I learned about their digestive. Like, great, let's throw that in there as well. It's
Okay.
only easier to do because it's so straightforward. You know what I'm saying? It's like you want to be a student, like write about like student stuff. Every student in America, especially ones who are applying to mostly these ones that have takes or opinions about learning or what they have learned. I
Right.
found my students do not have to dig into their soul. They do not have to. They don't have to. They are not on stage. Well, they're a little bit on stage. They are not like, yeah. They are not being tasked to make anyone cry or anything. No, like
Mhm.
it is about making that emotional connection, but generally through enthusiasm and joy and excitement. Something I'll find about FLL is that students it tends to pick up. Some students they effing love learning more than others, and I say many of them are fine with learning in service of a bigger goal is probably the most common. But
Okay,
yeah,
yeah.
some students like generally love it, and yes, like the students who love it, those are usually the easiest students to work with because it's the most effective. It's like just very genuine. But even students that are for it, you get them chatting, and I guess if you are if you have if you are this path, if you're trying to go to like Harvard or Stanford or Yale for a certain academic subject, or even Cornell, or if you've put in the time or energy to make yourself a competitive applicant, and you don't at least somewhat enjoy the work you're doing, like maybe you should reconsider your priorities, I guess.
Yeah,
And like
that's a
I
good
could say that
point.
because that's pretty rare. Like the
Mhm.
closest I usually get is a student that is kind of goes the other end. Like they're just anxious or like and they're over their
Right.
head about it. But 90% plus of students generally do care about what they do. And that's why just helping them figure out how to put that together and phrase it, that's why it can be so effective. And then D here is it scales.
Mhm.
As mentioned, this is a general strategy that the nature of the Common App, and I guess the UC application, is by basically focusing on a core, like single subject or philosophy. It is much easier than translate that material to other schools and to have a cohesive application that covers a similar base for all the ones you apply to. That opposed to, well, if you go with some other strategy, like most students don't have a strategy is the thing. Like having
Yeah,
a
that's true.
set defined like goal of what we're trying to cut. And again, is emphasize intellectual vitality as well as yeah. FLL is a college application strategy that emphasizes intellectual vitality as well as academic enthusiasm. Specifically, as an application with the primary goal of imparting a genuine level of learning, as well as creative and productive application of what students learned in ways that matter to them. The level of learning then can and should naturally translate to the opportunities they wish to partake in at their school. That's how you get into college. Like I was very proud looking at this outline of the definition I made. It turns out I can write even when I know how to do a podcast yet. That is always on my mind. Like those are the goals. And if you can also come off as a likable kid, like that's a nice added bonus. That's the one thing I could
Yeah.
add. There is nothing else you need to hit. Like there is like that is probably the key. And you can, I'm sure like some like have fun with it, have stuff like yeah, we do go other directions to some extent, but like no, like that is on my mind. And because it's that straightforward, it's very then easy to reuse a lot of the content or just reconfigure it to different schools and have a very similar skeleton key application of like, I love learning the most. Let me into college.
Right.
I'm now, well, we're entering my seventh year. So this is the fourth and a half year. I know what I'm doing. And it's the same strategy. And it's never going to change. Like
Mhm.
I'm more confident than ever, at least for me, that FLL is king. And I highly recommend students basically at least consider it. Like it's most helpful in practice. Like if you don't know what to write about, if you don't know what these schools want in particular, if you don't know what to be focusing on, try this and see how it goes because you might find that it's not that bad. You can like, totally figure it out, and also you end up with an
Right.
application that makes you sound like a good student, and that's how I believe you get into schools.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's Redux number one, Michelle. We'll be back, I guess, soon enough with going more in depth into this, where we talk about backing up your major, kind of the how of FLL. Ready for that?
Okay, got it. Yeah, ready.
All right, I'll see you next time.
See ya.
I am now taking on students for the 2025-26 college admission season. If you are a current junior who's looking for help, specifically with their college application and essays, you should check out my website. It's collegewithmattie.com, and there you can see my services, my blog with other written posts, as well as book out a free consultation where you get a chance to chat with me and see how I might be able to help. Looking forward to meeting with you.